What's up, everybody? It's your host and your boy, Don Mohsin here. Welcome to Flashy Knowledge, the podcast. My informal talk around entrepreneurship, business, life, and everything in between. Episode 4 is around top excuses on why people don't do things. So essentially, we're just looking at the excuses. And I've got a very special guest here today, Mr. John Howell himself. You may recognize him from one of the previous Flashy Knowledge videos I have. If you haven't seen it already, make sure you go check that out. John Howell is CEO of Global Music Group and owner of Bright Star Care. So he knows his fair share around entrepreneurship, business, and some of the trials and tribulations. So we wanted to do this because excuses are everywhere. We all make them, some of us more than others. And I wanted to, obviously talk to John because he has a wide breadth of knowledge around business and entrepreneurship and just running his own companies. And I wanted to see if we could give you guys some motivation around the excuses that we hear and how to kind of combat them, because a lot of the times our excuses are what hold us back from getting to the next level in life. So John, have any opening words?
No, thanks for having me though. I think this is going to be a really interesting topic, mainly because everybody should share these type of experiences.
Yeah.
Regardless, not just in business, but overall. So I think it'll be really interesting.
Cool. All right. So a little bit of background here. We actually wrote down, without conversating with each other, we wrote down what were our top 2 excuses that we hear on why people don't do things. And they were actually an exact match.
They were.
So this will actually be pretty smooth sailing. The first one we selected was people don't have time. This is number 1. People don't have time. I've heard this plenty of times. I've made this excuse myself. So, and John's obviously nodding your head.
Yeah.
My background around this is that was kind of my way to tell myself it's okay that I'm not doing something, and make an excuse that, hey, if I couldn't get like 10 things done, it's fine. It's all good. I'm just too busy. But when I actually took time to audit what I did that day,
right?
Maybe it could have been some naps, it could have been catching up on Arrested Development or The Office. I realized, okay, well, I'm not spending the time where I need to be spending time. Yeah. And the more I did that, the more I realized how much time-wasting activities that I actually engaged in. And do you have an experience where maybe you knew you weren't spending the right amount of time and you did like an audit or something like that?
Well, the first 2 years before I opened Global Music Group. So I had the same type of excuses, and actually it lets you off the hook a little bit, so you feel a little bit better. But if you think about it, really, you have time for what's important to you. You make time for what's important.
I love that.
So if it's important enough to you, you will find the time. You will make the time. That may mean something else does not get that same level of attention.
Yeah.
But it's in life, just like in anything else, you want to prioritize what's the most important thing. So if starting a business or being an entrepreneur, getting out of the rat race, if that's what you would like to get to, then you have to make time for it. I mean,
that's really powerful. I mean, if it's important to you, you'll make time.
Yep.
It's plain and simple. So I think what we're both doing was, it wasn't a high priority on our list because we just didn't prioritize our stuff properly, right? And we ended up doing other things to waste our time.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly. So there was a time that I spent so much energy focusing on what my career would be, at corporate job.
Yeah.
If you take just a fraction of that energy and put it towards doing something and building something for yourself, you would be amazed at what you can accomplish. I mean, the 2 years before I started GMG, I was sitting there making all these excuses, and it only took me 6 months to actually get the company up and running. I just spent 2 years saying I don't have the time, right? Yeah. And everything's done, set up in 6 months. Now that doesn't mean that that the company runs itself and you're making money, but
Sure.
putting the structure and the foundation in place. I mean, you've got to start somewhere, right?
So what changed for you, like when you were lollygagging for 2 years, but then all of a sudden you built in 6 months? Was it a mindset thing? Do you just use your time properly, or was it a combination of all that?
Oh, good question. So for me, it was a combination. I definitely had to change my mindset, my way of thinking. So now the reverse is true. So before it was, where is my career going to take me?
Mm-hmm.
And so that had to change from what am I going to do for myself to put myself in a position to be successful without the company, without the corporate gig. So that kind of mentality had to take shape first, and then also, of course, life happens. So things happen. You have kids, all these other things that have this impact on your life, and those will change the way that you address situations or even think about things. So that's what really happened for me.
Okay, so essentially your mission changed.
Yeah.
You're like, I need to step up and find out what I need to do in my side hustle, my business, to be able to get out of the corporate life and find a way that, because it became priority for you to do that.
Yep.
So, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly very similar. I think even my metrics are about the same as yours. I spent about 2 years just dabbling here and there, but really wasting my time on stuff I didn't need to focus on for the company. Just overthinking, but that was also my way to prolong it and be like, oh well, it's not happening because of this and that. Just more and more excuses, and then it became to a point where I just started using that. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that, and to me it was a swirl of stuff that just came on board, and I had excuses for everything on why things weren't happening. But then, to your point, once I reached a threshold where I was like, this is enough is enough. I'm either going to do this or I'm not. My priority changed. How I use my time changed, and I got very strict on everything. And I got my social media up and running. I got interns. I actually got a business model, and I actually had products and services. So it's a mindset, but it's also getting all the variables aligned as well. That may not just be mindset. It could just be how you structure your day, how serious you take things, and time looks like it's just one of them. But it's the one we go to at first, because it's the one easily available. So how are we going to solve this for people? What's your recommendation if they make an excuse they don't have time? Even though you kind of answer that, just plain and simple, how would you put it? Somebody comes to you and says, John, I don't have time to do this. What are you going to tell them?
Then it's not important to you. It's not important enough to you.
Yeah.
If it is, then you'll make the time. You'll find the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
I didn't sleep a lot for those 6 months, but it was a priority to me.
I love that. Okay, so John's advice is, if you say you don't have time, it's probably not important to you. Make it important if you want to make changes. And from my end, if you say you don't have time, I would say audit your day. Sit down and write down everything you've done for that day, maybe by like 15-minute increments, and you'll find out that, hey, maybe you shouldn't have took so long to eat. Maybe you're taking an hour to eat because you're watching YouTube, and I'm saying this out of experience. Or maybe you're just spending too much time on your phone or social media or something that you could dedicate to something really important. So audit your day and find out what those time wasting activities are and get rid of them. All right. Number 2, ironically, we also agreed on this. There were slight variations on it, but for the most part, we agreed. The second most, or the excuse number 2 that we hear the most, is people say they don't know how to get started, or they don't know what to do at the beginning, and then because of that, they just never get started. So, what's your background on that, John?
Google, people. Google is your friend. No, but I had some of the same mentality at the beginning. I'm like, shoot, it takes, because when you're thinking about the company, you're already thinking about the big bang. Like, what's the end result going to look like? You have to kind of step back from that and say, okay, so how do I take the first step?
Yeah.
If you start thinking about the whole end result, you will be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do today just to move the needle? And that may be getting on Google and finding out, how do I start a business? Wherever state that you live in or whatever. I mean, very simple. Just Google it. If you don't have anybody that you can talk to, I mean, luckily I have you, Mo. But if you do not have someone that you can speak to, you can absolutely go out to Google, and there's so much information out there that can help you take that first step in the right direction.
Have you been at a point where you didn't know? I'm sure you have, but I'm just going to ask anyway. Have you been at a point where you're like, I don't know what the heck to do next? Like, what's the next step? Like, how the heck am I supposed to figure this out? What'd you do there?
No, I haven't. That's because when I decided that this is what I was going to do, I made it a priority to actually outline what I was going to do in 6 months increments or quarterly or whatever. So assigning goals to make sure that I drive to them and keep me engaged in what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So,
so that's good. So it's interesting. You've never been stuck on not knowing how to start because you had goals set up. So you basically eliminated that whole gray area because you're resourceful, and when you had a goal, you found out how to achieve those little goals no matter what. So that's very interesting. So to you, it wasn't even an option to not know how to start.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Yeah. From my end, I've been in this situation many times, actually, opposite of John. The lasting impression of my first company, right? And I actually hated social media. I wasn't on it. I just thought people were complaining too much. It got on my nerves. Yeah. And so I've been off social media for 3, 4 years. Didn't know anything about Instagram, Twitter until I've been watching a lot of CEO type stuff, and they're like, you got to be on social media if you want your company to thrive nowadays. So I had no idea how to get started, and I'm actually a pretty private person, so to me it's like opposite of what I want to do, and I guess it's kind of a learned skill, and by no means I'm perfect at it, but it was just practice. Right, I didn't know how to start, but I just started practicing, and I do get it. Like it can be a little bit daunting and scary because it's social media, putting your business out there, and maybe it's not social media; it could be anything, right? Maybe it's just starting a company, maybe it's your first group of people you're hiring, or your first interview, whatever it is, right? You don't know how to start, but then you let these fears stop you from ever doing it,
right?
And that I could say that to starting a company, I didn't know how to start. Marketing, I didn't know how to start. Social media, I didn't know how to start. Running ads, I didn't know how to start. But to John's point, there's so much information. We live in an information age where we want to know what to post on Facebook, and you can literally ask Siri or ask Google, and they will answer for you. You'll have your answer in like 5 seconds. Right. So I think what we're both trying to say here is there's no excuse. This isn't really an excuse, people. Right. It's not. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, maybe you could say, all right, and you might get away with it, but now there is no excuse. And I can tell you a lot of people still want to use this, but I shut them down real fast. Especially if they're like, well, I had someone who asked about designing t-shirts, and I don't know how to get started, don't know how to do it, where do I actually sell them? Google. How do I create my own t-shirts and sell them? There's so many sites and online e-commerce platforms that you can use, and that's just one example. So if you're using this as an excuse, I'm sorry to say it, but this actually really isn't one anymore.
Stop it.
This is real talk. It's just not an excuse anymore. You need to figure out what your priorities are, and you need to be resourceful. And that's kind of my way to solve this. I jumped the gun, but be resourceful. I think being resourceful nowadays is more useful and more important than ever, because everyone has access to the same information you do. Mm-hmm. And if you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs saying, I don't know how to get started, I don't know how to find this information, guess what? Thousands of people have, by the time you answered that or said that, thousands of people have already found the answer and they're working on it. So be resourceful, especially if you want to get into business, do your personal brand, whatever you want to do, entrepreneurship. be resourceful, find ways to get answers. And even if, let's say, entrepreneurship or business isn't for you, at work, let's say you work for a corporate job or whatever, being resourceful and being known for that at work is key as well, because you'll be known as a go-to person that's able to solve stuff. Even if people are stuck, you just find a way to get it done. And I can tell you, and John can probably attest to this as well, CEOs know how to get shit done, right? They find a way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your kind of way to solve this? I know I kind of went all over the place there. But
I kind of started off with it.
Yeah, you mentioned micro steps, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how they can break that down?
Yeah, sure. So, you don't have to eat the whole pie. Just start with
it's so good, though.
It's so good. Just start with, what do I need to do to accomplish this? So start out, just say, okay, so maybe today you just want to figure out, how do you start a business? Google that and just take on that piece of it. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about the funds, because that will draw you down into some other details. But just focus on that one clear step that you need to do and accomplish that. And then the next day or the next week, set a different one and follow that one.
Okay. Fantastic advice. All right. Any final words?
Yeah, I will also add that you should get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Amen. Yeah, amen.
I cannot stress that enough.
Thank you, John. So definitely wanted to thank John Howell for being here. Appreciate your time. That wraps us up for Flashy Knowledge Podcast episode 4, top excuses on why people don't do things. Just to reiterate, number 1 was you don't have time, and we squashed that real quick. There you go. We squashed that real quick. The way to go around that is make sure you audit your day by 15, 30-minute increments. Find out those time wasters, get rid of them. And as John mentioned, if you're saying that you don't have time for it, that means you haven't prioritized that goal or achievement. So you need to prioritize it, because at that point you will make time for it. And our second excuse that we heard the most is you don't know how to get started. We said that's actually not even an excuse nowadays, and John recommends to take micro steps. Don't try to eat the whole damn cake. Take small slices, accomplish them, and that way you won't feel overwhelmed. And I said just be resourceful. Find ways to get things done. Google, find mentors, research. It's all there at your fingertips. There's really no excuse to use this excuse. So that'll wrap us up for this week. I'll leave you with my personal mantra, folks. Remember, if you want to accomplish things, you got to take action to get action. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening.